Most people believe the safest place you can be is inside your own home, surrounded by your family. But on May 23rd of 2023, that idea was shattered inside a quiet home in Texas. A young woman didn't show up for work. She stopped answering her phone. And when someone finally went to check on her, they didn't find a break-in, and they didn't find a stranger. They found her brother just standing there inside her house. And what he would say next made even the police stop in disbelief. The Olalde family didn't stand out in any obvious way. If you drove past their house in Nash, Texas, you'd see exactly what you'd expect. A quiet home, a working father, a mom who knew everyone in the neighborhood. Kids growing up the way kids are supposed to. Nothing about them felt unusual. And that's exactly what makes this so hard to understand. They were just a family that from the outside looked stable, predictable, and safe. Their daughter Lisbeth was 24. She had just graduated college. She was engaged and she was about to start her new life as a teacher. Everything about her felt certain. Then there was Cesar, 18 years old, still in high school, just weeks away from graduating. He kept to himself. He did well in school and he didn't cause any problems. He was the kind of person no one worries about. And then there was Oliver, just 5 years old, always smiling and full of energy. The kind of kid who looked up to his older siblings, especially his older brother, Cesar. All of them living under the same roof. A family that by all accounts was close. There were no warning signs, no history of violence, and no reason for anyone to believe something was wrong. But inside that house, something was brewing. And by the time anybody realized it, it was too late. Nash is a quiet and very small suburban area of Texarkana, Texas. It has a population of just 4,000 people, and it's exactly how you would picture a small town. Tight-knit community, very uneventful, and overall peaceful. But this peace would soon be disrupted. See, it was May 23rd of 2023, and Lisbeth was due to work at a local church on this particular day. But she never made it. Now, this was a small community where everyone was aware of their neighbors, their coworkers, and everyone in between. So when Lisbeth, who normally never skipped work, or at least informed her coworkers beforehand, didn't show up to the church, this made everyone worry. This was unlike Lisbeth. She was very punctual, very responsible, and everyone in the family was, for that matter. And if they missed even one thing from their routine, it was pretty odd. Now, I know things can take a turn in life, and things can happen and you just can't reach somewhere and be on your usual A game. And the same could have been said for Lisbeth too. Maybe she just wasn't feeling well, or had some kind of emergency come up and just didn't go to work. Well, the latter would be much closer to reality. The thing is, her coworkers were thinking about this same thing too. Could she have been in trouble or in some kind of accident? Well, she wasn't answering her phone, and their concerns started to grow exponentially. This was too much to be a mere coincidence. Not showing up for work, but now not answering your phone? This was really weird. Now, to give you an idea of how the people looked out for each other in this quaint little city, one of Lisbeth's co-workers at the church, a man by the name of Joseph Fleider, and his wife decided to go to Lisbeth's home and check up on her. In their heads, they just wanted some peace of mind. Lisbeth's silence was really unusual, and this was not normal at all. She wasn't answering her phone, so was she in trouble? And what if she needed help? They just thought they would make sure that she was okay, and these were the thoughts going through Joseph and his wife's minds as they made that drive from the church to Lisbeth's home. When the couple arrived at the house, it was quiet. The door was closed, and there was no activity considering the time of day, and it just looked pretty eerie. Joseph and his wife got out of the car, and they walked up to the front door. Still, nothing seemed alarming at that point. The door was obviously closed, so Joseph knocked, and then he waited. Then he knocked some more, but there was no answer. The house sounded deserted, which would have been impossible since there were supposed to have been people in the house at this time. At this point, another relative of the Olalde family arrived at the house too, and just like Joseph, they were concerned. Ruben and Ida were not answering their phones and had not been heard from since that morning. Well, it was decided on the spot to break into the house. Now, for a lot of people, this might seem excessive, but they were genuinely worried. This was incredibly unusual. The house was silent. No one came to the door when they knocked. The most obvious conclusion was that no one would have been home, but then why weren't any of the family members, any of them, answering their phones? But as soon as Joseph and the relative broke through the door, they were met with someone. It was Cesar, the teenage son of the family. Even though Joseph admits that he doesn't remember much after this initial encounter, he knew something was terribly wrong. Why? Well, because Cesar was armed and waiting, standing there, just staring at Joseph. Right away, Joseph could sense the immense danger, so he told everyone else to stay outside and not to come in. This was seriously daunting, to think that Joseph was inside with an armed Cesar who was apparently a clear threat. And immediately he noticed a lot of bizarre and chilling things around the house. There were spent ammunition casings all over the floors of the house, as well as very disturbing stains and smears. But what Joseph couldn't see or hear was the rest of the Olalde family. They were nowhere to be seen, and he knew this was not a good sign. It looked horrific, but the only person Joseph could see in the flesh was Cesar. Joseph remembers Cesar going on and on about how he had to get rid of his family because his life was in danger, and he was also threatening to hurt himself. At this point, the people outside of the Olalde family home called the police because they knew something was very wrong when Joseph never came back out of that house and told everyone to wait outside. They didn't want to risk anyone's safety any longer. And with that, the police were on their way. While Joseph was in the house with Cesar, who was clearly losing his patience by the minute, police sirens started blaring outside. At one point, Cesar was given a phone to talk to an officer to tell them what he had done, but he was anything but pleasant on that phone call. He was very angry and on edge and just went on and on about his family and the fact that he had taken them all out one by one. Well, when the police arrived, Cesar was his usual uncooperative self. He didn't want to surrender, and the whole situation was incredibly bizarre and tense. By this point, Joseph had thankfully managed to escape the house. Cesar was a risk. He was not afraid to threaten the police officers with his weapons, and the whole altercation led the police to cordon off the entire area. The neighborhood didn't look like its usual self anymore. Police cars and vans littered the driveways, and from the outside looking in, you would think you were in the middle of a war zone. But in reality, it was an entire fleet of police officers against one 18-year-old boy who was clearly disturbed. The detectives had to tread gently in this situation. Things could have ended really badly with just one misstep, one miscalculation. A negotiator was called to the scene, and the efforts to calm Cesar down and get him to surrender lasted for over 2 hours. The tension and intensity during that time, it was unimaginable. Police were doing everything they could to save Cesar's life and spare him, but they were beginning to lose hope. But thankfully, after 2 hours, Cesar relented, and he was ready to come out of the house and hand himself over to the police. Immediately, the police jumped into action as they saw Cesar emerging from that house. They disarmed him and then arrested him. But there was something else that awaited inside that eerily quiet Olalde family home. At this point, the police only knew bits and pieces of what Joseph had managed to see while he was inside the house. They knew that Cesar had claimed to have ended the lives of his entire family. They knew that something had happened within the walls of this quiet and peaceful home. But now, they had to go inside the home and see things for themselves. What was waiting for the officers inside, it was grim, to put it lightly. A family that was once happy, thriving, and healthy was now gone. And the only thing the police knew was that their teenage son of that very same family was responsible for the whole ordeal. But why? What could have possibly led to something like this? Well, for Cesar, the explanation was simple. His family tried to eat him. As if it wasn't shocking enough to know that a young 18-year-old boy who was so close to graduating high school was the one who attacked his family like this, the house had something more devastating in store for the police officers. See, as the police made their way inside the house, they saw everything that Joseph saw too, and it was disturbing. They went from room to room, but they couldn't find any of the family members. Only chaos was left after the attack. The police's search led them to a bathroom, the same bathroom where Joseph saw Cesar emerge fully armed. When the police went inside, they found everything they needed to, and it was really bad. All 4 family members of the Olalde family were attacked and lifeless in that bathroom. Ruben, Ida, Lisbeth, and Oliver were all gone. They had all sustained firearm injuries. But what's even more devastating is the fact that the family members were not attacked in that bathroom. According to the Nash police affidavit, it's believed that the family members were attacked separately in various places of the house, some even possibly in their respective bedrooms, and they'd all lost their lives and were dragged to the bathroom by Cesar. Needless to say, the police were not expecting such a heartless attack from someone who was part of this family, and Ida appeared to have been the most targeted person of the group, which just adds another layer to this whole mess, his own mother. Now, we don't know if the victims were asleep when Cesar was attacking them, but it doesn't make anything any better, because Cesar, the quiet, unassuming, and seemingly normal son, it's a different kind of hurt. Soon after the police uncovered this crime scene, they tracked down another member of the family, Diana, Cesar's other sister, and she was notified of this extremely haunting news. Diana had just woken up on an ordinary Tuesday and was told that her entire family was gone forever, and her brother was the reason behind it all. But what could have possibly led to this escalation? Well, the police had to get to the bottom of it, and luckily, they had their guy in handcuffs, and he was ready to talk. Cesar was taken to the police station, and he was interrogated for the crimes. And then he told the officers the reason why he committed these crimes. The reason was as bizarre as everything that had unfolded that day. Because according to Cesar, he had no choice but to protect himself from his family, because they were, and I quote, going to eat him alive. And you heard that right, Cesar basically outed his entire family because he thought they were cannibals. I cannot imagine how the police must have reacted to this, because you definitely don't hear this every day. The investigators were floored. They were expecting a more logical reason, like rebellion or something fitting or dark for a teenager, but this is just hard to get a grip on. And it was extremely frustrating because Cesar didn't clarify any further. He just told the police that he took one look at his family and he saw them as flesh-eating monsters and that they activated his fight-or-flight response. He knew that he had to save his own life, otherwise he would be the one who wound up dead in this fiasco. So he armed himself with a weapon. And side note, we don't actually know how Cesar got his hands on that weapon. Was it already in the house? Did it belong to one of his parents? How did he even gain access to this? The police have never disclosed this, and it doesn't seem like Cesar has either. But regardless, he told the police that he just took the weapon, aimed at his family, and didn't stop. If he did stop, he knew that without a doubt, they'd be coming for him to quite literally eat him. He started with his dad, whom neighbors saw working together with Cesar in the family garden and running errands just a couple days ago. They were always smiling, and never once did anyone think that things could turn out like this. Then his mom, the woman who carried him for 9 months and loved him as much as herself, if not more, and was a guiding light in his life. And then his sister, who was so accomplished and even engaged to be married. Cesar was about to get a brother-in-law. Lisbeth and Jeremiah were so in love and could not wait for this new chapter of their lives, only for Cesar to slam the book closed before it could even begin. And lastly, and probably the most heartbreaking, his little brother Oliver. Following Cesar's arrest, he was held in jail on a $10 million bond. He was charged with capital murder for each of his victims. He was also charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, and a single count of injury to Oliver. Judging by the charges, Cesar was looking at 2 concurrent life sentences for each murder count. But then he was also charged with assault because he threatened Joseph and other people, including police officers, before his arrest. Now, given the nature of this case and the diabolical reason given by Cesar for his actions, of course, there is a huge discourse involving mental health and Cesar's competency to stand trial. Now, I don't know for certain if Cesar was diagnosed with anything in the past or following this incident, but according to mental health experts, mental factors were predominant in the wake of this investigation. Everyone was appalled at Cesar's reasoning, and rightfully so. They seriously questioned his mental stability at the time of the case, so naturally he underwent multiple psychiatric evaluations. He was initially deemed mentally unfit to stand trial by a mental health expert, but later on, another psychiatric evaluation conducted by a different mental health expert found that he was actually competent to stand trial. He was presented in front of a court, and without hesitation, he pleaded guilty to all charges. So, the only silver lining to this entire tragedy was that the remaining member of the family, Diana, didn't have to sit through a trial and go over this painful ordeal. Now, this case took place in Texas, and for capital murder, the sentencing can go one of two ways. Either the criminal could get life in prison without a possibility of parole, or they could get the death penalty. Naturally, Diana's input was taken when the state pursued this case, and Diana, she was in a very tough spot. This was her brother, but he was also the murderer of her entire own family. He was the reason why she was left alone, but due to religious reasons and personally not condoning the death penalty, Diana opted for life imprisonment. In the end, since there was no trial, the case went straight to sentencing, and 18-year-old Cesar Olalde was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, as well as 50 years as part of a plea agreement to not pursue a trial. Cesar was kept at Bowie County Jail, and from there, he was most probably transferred to a unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. A young boy who was just days away from graduating high school was now behind bars. There was no buildup, and no one saw this brewing. It just was. Following this immense tragedy, Diana set up a GoFundMe for her family's funeral expenses. She's literally the only one left out of the family, and I cannot imagine the pain of losing everyone because of one person in said family. The GoFundMe managed to collect over $60,000, which hopefully did cover her impending expenses. This case is unlike any other case out there. From the outside looking in, the Olalde family was perfect. They didn't get into any trouble. Everyone was nice, kind, polite, and hardworking. But to see this twist of events is unsettling. No one knows Cesar's mental state at the time of the tragedy. Was he really going through some kind of psychotic episode where he thought that his family was really trying to eat him? Of course, no one knows that besides Cesar. But what makes this case so unsettling is just the lack of signs. There were literally none. There was no sign that Cesar was struggling with his mental health. He didn't display any warning in anything at all. He didn't do or say anything that would make anyone recoil or run for the hills. Sure, he was a loner at times, and his pictures were mostly bathroom selfies of him with his AirPods in. But does every loner go on to commit the murder of their own families? Of course not. And also, I want to disclaim that I'm not trying to downplay his actions. Mental health issues or not, what he did was beyond unacceptable. It was excessive. It was a very violent attack, too. There's no easy way of saying this, and that's what makes this case so terrifying and heartbreaking at the same time, because every member of that family was totally defenseless against him. They never could have anticipated that their lives would end like this, at the hands of their own flesh and blood. If this case had involved a stranger, maybe things would have been different. Would it be just as devastating? Sure, without a doubt. But with strangers attacking people, there's no attachment that can just go and rattle everyone with such intensity. There's mostly just negative emotions and conflicting feelings that fuel people to commit these crimes. But when someone from your very own family commits an act like this, it's a different story. You begin to question all the people that you've lived with and trusted for your whole life. And when that trust breaks or it gets tarnished, there's no going back. Cesar claims it was his mind telling him to deal with his family before they dealt with him. But what really happened behind closed doors? This case just sheds light on a person's mental health and how quickly it can break, and that mysterious drive that led Cesar to do the unthinkable. It's things like this that keep people up at night, wondering who the real monsters really are.